Hello, and welcome to Math Matters. I'm Miss Matthews, and today we will be looking at probability. Yesterday, you learned that outcomes are all of the things that can happen from an event. Today, you are going to learn about the probability words that describe the likelihood that an outcome could happen. Today's goal is to stay on task during your work time, to follow through and finish what you start. For today's lesson, you will need a pencil and a piece of paper. We'll wait for you as you gather these materials. Take a look at these two pictures. How are they the same? How are they different? You can share your ideas with someone or write down your thinking on a piece of paper. I'll give you a few moments to do that. Can you come up with one other reason why they are the same but different? You may have noticed that they are the same because they both have 4 sections on the spinner. You may have also noticed that they both have a red, blue, yellow, and green section. You may have also noticed that they're both spinners with an arrow. Now on the differences, you may have noticed that they're different because the arrow is pointing to a different color on each spinner. You may have also noticed that the sections on the one spinner are all the same size as each other, but the sections on the other spinner are not the same size. Look at the line on the screen. Does it remind you of a tool that we use in math? If we add some numbers, it looks like a number line. Well, what do you notice about this number line? We will use a number line today as we think about probability. We can use specific words to describe probability. If I know that something is absolutely going to happen, I use the word certain. I am certain that the sun will rise tomorrow. Even if it's cloudy, the sun is still there and it rises every day. Events that are certain belong on the 1 on the number line. When we know that there is no way that something can happen, I say that it's impossible. It is impossible for me to reach into my silverware drawer and take out a plate. There are no plates in my silverware drawer. Events that are impossible belong on the 0 on the number line. Some events have outcomes that are equally likely. For example, when I flip a coin, there are 2 outcomes. It is equally likely that when I flip a coin, it will land on heads or tails. Events that are equally likely belong at the half mark on the number line. Sometimes outcomes fall in between these numbers and are described with other words. For example, it is likely that I will see a cloud in the sky tomorrow, because even if it's sunny, there can be clouds. It is unlikely that it will snow tomorrow, because we live in Virginia and it's springtime. Likely events would be placed between the equally likely and the certain on the number line. Unlikely events would be placed between impossible and equally likely. So now let's look at a different example. Let's look at these goldfish crackers. How many goldfish do you see? Of course, course, there's 10 goldfish. So now let's use these probability words to describe the likelihood that an outcome could happen. So what are the possible outcomes? If I put all of those goldfish crackers in that cup and picked one out, what might I pick? Write the different outcomes on your paper. Did you write 3 possible outcomes? Then you're right. I could pick purple, orange, or green. What if I wanted to pull a blue goldfish from this cup of goldfish? Write down the word which would describe the probability of that happening. Next, use the sentence frame to practice using that word in the sentence. Let's check and see what you said. It is impossible for me to pull a blue goldfish out of this cup. How do you know? You may have said that it is impossible because there aren't any blue goldfish in the cup. What if I wanted to pull out a goldfish from this cup of goldfish? What is the probability of pulling out a goldfish from the cup? Write down which word would describe the probability of that happening, and practice using that word in the sentence frame on the screen. Let's check and see what word goes here. It is certain that I will pull out a goldfish from the cup. How do you know? You may have said that it is certain because the whole cup is filled with goldfish. There are only goldfish in my cup, so I would definitely pull a goldfish out. What if I wanted to pull out a green goldfish from this cup of goldfish? Write down the word that would describe the probability of that happening, and then use the word in the sentence frame to practice. Did you say it is equally likely for me to pull a green goldfish as not a green goldfish? How do you know that it's equally likely? You may have said that it is equally likely because there are 5 green goldfish and 5 not green goldfish. There's the same number of goldfish that are green as are not green, so it's equally likely that I would pull a green one. Let's check out this spinner. We can use these probability words to describe the chance an outcome could happen. So what are the possible outcomes here? Write them on your paper. You've got it. There are only 2 possible outcomes. The arrow could land on red or blue. So what if I wanted that arrow to land on blue? Write down which word you would use to describe the probability of that happening. It is likely for me to land on blue. How do you know that? You may have said that it is likely because the part of the spinner that is blue is much larger than the part that is red. You may have also noticed that the blue part of the spinner is more than half of the entire spinner. So what if I wanted to land on red? Write down which word would describe the probability of that happening. It is unlikely for me to land on red. How did you know that? You may have said that it is unlikely because the part of the spinner that is red is much smaller than the part that is blue. You may have also noticed that the red part of the spinner is less than half of the entire spinner. Okay, so let's check out this spinner. What are the possible outcomes? Write them on your paper and practice using the sentence frame on the screen. The possible outcomes are red and blue because the arrow could land on red or blue. So now let's pull this together and see how a mathematician might ask and answer these questions. We can use these probability words to describe the chance that an outcome could happen. So what is the probability of the spinner landing on blue? Write down what word you would use to describe the probability of that happening, and practice using the sentence frame on the screen. Did you say that it is likely that the spinner will land on blue? Good for you. How did you know? You may have said that it is likely because the part of the spinner that is blue is much, much larger than the part that is red. Again, you may have noticed that the blue part of the spinner is more than half of the entire spinner. Now let's talk about the probability of spinning red. What is the probability of spinning red? Write down which word you would use to describe the probability of that happening, and then practice using that word in the sentence frame on the screen. It is unlikely that the spinner will land on red. How did you know that? Well, again, you may have said that it is unlikely because the part of the spinner that is red is so much smaller than the part that is blue. You may have also noticed that the red part of the spinner is less than half. It's even less than 1/4 of the entire spinner. Today we started learning about words that we can use to describe the likelihood that an outcome could happen for an event, while practicing being goal-directed and resilient as you stayed on task during this lesson. Which emoji represents where you are in this learning? For more practice, come up with examples of something that would be impossible, certain, equally likely, unlikely, or likely. See how many different examples you can come up with. I hope you have a fun-filled mathematical day. I'm Miss Matthews, and I'll see you next time on Math Matters.